record on this. Awesome. Yay. I'm remembering to record now before I give my introduction, because last time I think I gave this whole introduction and then remembered, oh, I have to record. So it'll be good to get a little piece about me on there this time. Well, hi, everybody who's here. I expect some more people to be rolling in over the next couple of minutes, but I'll just give a brief introduction of myself. Sorry if this is the second time you'll hear it, but some people are new. And I just want to give a little hello. My name is Tay or Taylor, and I've been working with mushrooms really all my life in many ways. Born and raised in Florida, and it's very fungally diverse and fecund there. So I was inoculated with the awareness of fungi ever since I was a little girl. And then throughout time, just always infatuated with science, got my degree in biology. But I really deepened with mycology as a practice when I came out here to California about 5.5 years ago now. And I just, if you don't mind muting yourself, that would be awesome, because I'm getting a little bit of feedback in the background. Thank you. Appreciate it. Where was I? So yeah, I came out here to California and realized that, wow, mycology and devotion and study of fungi is actually something that I can do with my life. It was never really a concept that was taught to me when I was in Florida. So I just became infatuated, fully infatuated, and became aware of the infinite pathways that one can travel through when studying mycology and with working with the fungal beings. And I've really kind of done my due diligence to tap into a lot of those mycelial threads of fungi. I have been working with medicinal mushrooms for about 5 years now, making medicine and studying them. I've been foraging and seeking mushrooms for about 5 years as well, cultivating for about 6, and doing mycoremediation work for about 4 years now. So there's many different subfields within mycology that one can journey upon, and I've kind of been swooned by all of them. So that's a little bit about me. And I just want to give a disclaimer that by no means am I a doctor. I'm not a clinical herbalist. So everything that I'm sharing here tonight is really just amalgamated from my passion and my deep study and research of medicinal fungi, but I'm not here to diagnose anyone. I'm not here to give prescriptions to anyone. I'm just here to be on a journey with you and to hopefully facilitate interest and curiosity and facilitate many light bulbs going off for you all that are interested in medicinal fungi, and just deepening in relationship with your ecology and the beings within your ecology, because fungi are such a great way to do that. What else for logistics? Ryath is a little square on the screen somewhere around here. He's to my left right now. But that's my sweetie, and he's also a very, very brilliant mycologist. And he'll be moderating the chat and answering any questions as they come up. There'll be a couple points within the slides where we can kind of take a break and breathe and check in and ask questions if there is any. But if you have something that just comes to the top of your mind, put it in the chat, and he will do his best to answer. And if he can't answer it, then he'll pass it on over to me at the end. And then there'll be a question and answer and dialogue time at the end as well. So without further ado, oh, and one more thing, if you want to just put your name and pronouns and where you are currently living, and if you know the names of the indigenous peoples of where you live, go ahead and put that in the chat, because it'd be awesome to get to know everyone a little bit and everyone to get the opportunity to know each other. And I'm going to share my screen now.
I'll add too that even if I do answer a question in chat or try to, oftentimes last presentation I asked Taylor anyway, because there's so many different answers to the questions and ways of interpreting the question. And so I think it's great to get as many informed perspectives as possible when questions are asked. So just in case, if you see me write something in the chat in response, that doesn't mean that I'm not going to bring it up to Tay. I usually just wait until there's like a good opening to do so, just so everyone knows.
Thank you.
And hello, I'm muting now. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Rai. Appreciate it. Okay, well, welcome to part 2 of Connecting with Medicinal Fungi. And I'm really excited for this part because it feels much more like enriching and natural and easeful for me to talk about the actual fungi themselves, because these are really like the whole beings that I am in relationship with when I talk about medicinal fungi. It's like it's these ones that are you know, the interface of the topic in the field. And you know, last session, just for anyone who wasn't here, we talked a lot about mushroom constituents. So like what in the mushroom makes the medicine, and why are they creating these compounds first and foremost for themselves? Why do mushrooms create medicinal constituents in the first place? And then what are they doing for the mushrooms? And then also how do our bodies take in those constituents, and why are those constituents medicinal for us? So we went on a deeper journey with that. And then we also talked about medicinal mushroom preparations, as well as we touched on like when looking at medicinal mushroom studies, what are we looking out for? And when buying mushroom medicine, what are we looking out for as well? It was just a big overview of all of those topics. And hopefully, if you were here for part 1, you know, specifically when we talked about constituents, hopefully that can carry over when I say some of the names of these constituents today, and how they exist in each particular mushroom. But if you weren't here, then that's okay. And you can always catch up and ask clarifying questions if something doesn't make sense. Okay. I just want to honor and acknowledge the land that I am speaking from, the land that I live with here on the border of Southern Pomo and Coast Miwok territory. And as a person of Northern European diaspora who is a visitor on these lands, I just try to walk with the question of how am I participating in the deep story that these lands hold. And really, you know, without trying to even pretend like I have an answer, just asking myself that question, walking with that question, with that intention of, is the way I walk contributing to the health of these lands, the health of this story, and the health of the future of the beings who live on these lands. So thank you to the tens of thousands of years of tending from the indigenous people of these places that are continuing to tend every day. And I mentioned it last talk, but this paper up in the left-hand corner by MCAT Harrison and Frake K. Lake, it's a really comprehensive deep dive into the ethnomycology of the indigenous peoples of California. And it's just incredibly worth reading every single word. It is so insightful and beautiful and affirming. For me, it was very affirming, and just the sense of like, of course, the people who live here and have lived here have a deep relationship with fungi, because a lot of the times that's not a thing that's talked about, and it's important to recognize that it's there. So a little overview for this time together. We're going to talk about ethical foraging and harvesting practices for different types of medicinal mushrooms. And then we're going to talk about the abundant medicinal mushrooms in this bioregion and beyond, because this can be applied, you know, specifically here to this area of what's today known as Sebastopol and the general Bay Area, but it can also be applied beyond this bioregion. And for those who were here last talk, I gave kind of an overview about fungal biology and ecology, and I'm just going to quickly go through that as well, because it's really, really important to know these pieces, especially when we want to start deepening in relationship with fungi. And repetition is key to learning anything. So sorry if I sound like a broken record here, if you guys are already like, oh, I know all this, but it feels important to just kind of graze over once again. So if you see this little hand here on the left-hand side, this is a beautiful hand by in one of Lynn Margulis's book, and it's representing the different kingdoms, queendoms of life. And as you can see, fungi are their totally own finger, which means they are their entirely own queendom of life. They are different than protists and bacteria. They are different than plants. They are different than animals. They are an entire realm of their own. And they deserve justice. They deserve acknowledgement. And one of the people who's my personal hero is Juliana Furci, and she is a female mycologist in Chile, the first. And she is also the founder of the Fungi Foundation, who's doing incredible work in conservation of fungal biodiversity all around the world. And I highly, highly recommend looking into her and her organization if you want to find out more about how people are advocating for fungal conservation, which is kind of like a new thing. Fungi were just written into the IUCN Red List for endangered species not that long ago. And she's, kind of the spearhead in that whole movement. And once again, the fungi are not just medicine for humans. They are ecological medicine. So they've been doing medicinal, if you'd like to think of it that way, work on the planet for billions of years, 1.5-ish to be exact, when they started diversifying from the rest of life. And they are doing the work of decomposing and recomposing. And there's this beautiful metaphor I like working with. If you think of waterways as the blood vessels of the planet, then you could think of mycelium as the neural network, because they're literally like sending information. And now we know that they communicate via electric pulses. It's one of the ways that fungi communicate with each other. And what do the neurons in our brain do? They communicate and send information via electricity. So it's not far off than what's happening right up here. And they do so many other things and play so many roles in our ecologies, from building soil, recycling nutrients, being food and medicine for so many other beings besides humans, and so much more. They're physiological medicine, so making medicine from decay, which we'll talk about. A lot of these ones that I have with me here are ones that take dead and decaying organic matter and transform it into their body, which is medicine, as well as energetic medicine as being the bridgers of life and death and light and the dark. And they're what I like to say, these interface organisms that kind of exist at this ecotone of polarities. And they just have so much to teach us. And I think it's one of our big responsibilities as a species right now to listen to their teachings. And once again, fungi are, like I said, their whole own queendom. And within that queendom, there's 5 main phyla. And mostly we're going to be talking about the little branch all the way to the left-hand side, the Basidiomycota. These are a lot of our like large above ground fleshy macro fungi. And there's a lot of different species in just that one branch. And then a lot of different species that don't even form mushrooms at all, like our molds and our arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi. They don't even form mushrooms themselves. So fungi are much more than just mushrooms. And we've described about 130,000 species, but it's estimated that there's 3 to 5 million species on the planet. Someone asked a really good question last time. They asked, how do they get those estimations? And I don't know. I don't know how one estimates how many species there could be on the planet. If anyone knows the answer to that, I'd be really curious. But anyway, if that's the estimation, then that means we know about 2.5% of fungal diversity on the planet. And, at least we know that we don't know. I think it's very humbling to be in that awareness. And of all of that, about 2,000 species are considered edible, and then only about 200 or so known species are collected for food and medicine. And I put known there in those stars because there is very well many species of fungi that are collected for food and medicine that just like the Western scientific world hasn't necessarily described or found out about yet. I wouldn't be surprised if in different indigenous cultures around the world, there are mushrooms that are used for food and medicine that we just don't know. So I want to leave room for that possibility as well. And this is the current contemporary rendition of the actual fungal tree of life, which, as you can see, is very elaborate and dynamic and diverse and just so beautiful. This is such an incredible diagram. I recommend looking into it, even though I maybe understand like only a quarter of what's going on here. There's a lot to see there. And then, yeah, just fungal diversity is so gorgeous. Here's a big collage of different photos that Raif and I both took over the past couple winters, because winter here in California is our mushroom season, because that's when there's rain, and mushrooms come with rain and they won't come without water. They're bound to the presence of water. And I'm going to go over the life cycle again. Because this, the life cycle really comes in handy, more than in handy, is I think imperative to know when we start talking about ethical foraging or regenerative foraging or like proper harvesting. It's really the life cycle that's going to give us like the most tuned in awareness of how we are participating and interacting with this organism. And how to do it respectfully and how to do it at the right time. Like, when do we know when the right time to harvest something is? And it really comes down to understanding the life cycle. So quickly going through this, we'll start with the fruit body. As you can see here, this big mushroom with its gills open. And from those gills, from that fertile spore producing surface, the spores are going to come. And those are going to travel by wind or water or on the backs of flies or on animals or in your basket as you're walking through the forest. And those are going to land on a surface. And if the environmental conditions are right on that surface, they're going to germinate, just like the seeds of a plant would. Except out of these spores, roots are not going to come. Hyphae is going to form. And they're very, very different than plant roots. Won't get too into that, but hyphae are going to, a single strand of hypha is going to emerge out of these spores and travel through whatever substrate that they're in, whether it's wood, whether it's soil, whether it's a dead body, whether it's a leaf. The hyphae are going to move and seek, and what they're really seeking, they're seeking nutrients and water, and they're seeking a mate. In the process of two hyphae seeking one another is called homing, which I really love. It's like they're traversing home together. And when these two genetically compatible hyphae meet in this little meeting place right here, I don't have control of my mouse, which kind of is a bummer. But you can see where it says mating between hyphae from different spores. They're going to fuse. So their cells are actually going to cytoplasmically fuse, but their nuclei are not going to fuse. So there's not going to be genetic exchange happening in that moment. They just kind of like merge their bodies together. And then they're going to, continue to fractal and diversify and move throughout their substrate and get food and water and everything they need. And this is actually where most of the fungus's life is going to be spent, in the mycelial phase, in the seeking, in the homing phase, in the darkness. And then when environmental conditions become appropriate, or when food gets scarce, or when they've fully eaten through whatever they're eating, that's when signals are going to send, and they're going to say, oh, it's time to produce a mushroom, and send out the next genetics for the next generation. And so then you form a primordia, which is basically a small mushroom. And then that mushroom is going to mature and then genetic combination will happen, recombination will happen, and then you have another fertile spore producing mushroom. So that's the basics, and how that really is going to apply to harvesting and foraging is, well, it's species specific. So we'll go more into it when we start talking about the specific species. But one thing I will say is that if you are wanting to be sure that there is a healthy gene pool in a specific population of fungi, then you will want to wait until that mushroom has produced a good amount of fertile surface. So if you are picking like tiny little baby mushrooms before they've gilled out or before their pores are expressed, then you're taking a lot of chances for genetic diversity away from that mushroom. So there's kind of this sweet spot where when they start producing spores, but not when they're like too old. And we'll talk more about that later. The main different types of mushrooms, we're just going to focus on the saprotrophic fungi tonight, because that's most of what we'll be talking about. And the saprotrophs are the ones that are taking dead and decaying material and turning it into food and medicine. So the saprotrophic fungi are ones that are eating wood or leaf material or body material, whatever it might be, whatever is dead and dying. Sapro literally means dead or dying, and trophic means to consume energy. So organisms that consume energy through dead and dying material. And that's all these friends. I wish I could move my computer and show you how many mushrooms that are around me right now. It's really funny. But all these friends that I have around me right now are saprotrophic. And then the other one we'll be talking about is we'll touch on a few mycorrhizal species. And all you really need to know about mycorrhizal fungi right now are they get their nutrition not by eating dead and decaying material, but by forming mutualistic relationships with the roots of living plants. And that's a very, very deep rabbit hole of complexity. And I love to talk about mycorrhizae, but we won't be focusing on that tonight. And I like to say that, to understand any natural medicine, it's important to understand the ecology of which it comes from, because there's more research coming out about it now. But I personally hold the hypothesis and the belief that the medicinal constituents and the potency of mushrooms are highly dependent on what and where they're growing. Fungi are inherently absorbers. They're literally producing enzymes out of their mycelium and then absorbing food from the world around them. So there's a lot of interesting examples, one particularly being chaga, which gets a lot of its triterpenes, specifically betulinic acid, which is a constituent that's in the birch tree of which it grows on. So there's this like the boundaries get really foggy when it comes to like, well, is it just the mushroom making that medicine, or is it coming from the substrate to a certain degree, and like how do they synthesize? So just important whenever I'm out foraging or harvesting anything, I'm always paying attention to what is it growing on, who are they around. It's really fun. It opens up whole new worlds of potential and awareness. This is a little graphic I made just showing like where could one find these different types of fungi in the environment. Saprotrophic growing right directly out of logs and like dying logs and wood or leaves. Parasitic, usually growing out of living trees or the roots of living trees. And ectomycorrhizal fungi usually are just growing right out of the soil, because they're the ones that are the myceliums connected deep down with the roots of living trees. So you could potentially find all of these different types of fungi growing off of one tree, depending on the state of that tree and the state of the ecology that you're in. We're going to talk a lot about the specifics for each mushroom this evening when we go into them. But this is just kind of a basic breakdown of like what to look for anatomically when you're leaning into identifying a mushroom, because they're just as, if not more complex than humans. It's like, everyone has their own little facial features. Everyone has their own expression of being. Everyone has their own particular hair color and hair texture and facial structure. It's the same thing for fungi, maybe even like I said, more diverse. And so getting to know all these different terms is an important part of the ongoing practice and process of being in relationship with fungi. And I could talk about just this slide for an entire hour, but this is just getting into the different things. So paying attention to what color the cap is, what's the texture, does it have gills on the underside, does it have gills like that, or does it have pores like this reishi, or does it have teeth, or does it have neither of those three? Does it have a stipe, or is it a shelf mushroom? Is it growing directly out of the substrate? Is it coming out of like an egg sac? Does it have a scent? Does it have a taste? Something that Raif and I love to do when we teach mushroom walks, or when we guide mushroom walks, is kind of demystify the whole like, oh, I can't touch mushrooms, or I can't like put them in my mouth. And it is safe to put the flesh of any mushroom inside of your mouth, just a small amount, as long as you just chew it up a little bit and then spit it out. I've never personally done it. Wait, no, I think I definitely have. But even the most deadly mushrooms like Amanita phalloides, also known as death cap, you can take a tiny piece of that flesh and just put it right in your mouth, chew it around and spit it out, and nothing will happen to you. So it's actually a very important part of mushroom identification, because you can have two mushrooms that look very similar and then they can taste completely different. And usually the taste can signify, like, is this a mushroom I should stay away from? Like a peppery taste in rasulas, or if it's mild, it could give you an indication that, okay, maybe this is taking me towards an edible species. And some mushrooms you just can't do that with, like with these hard, conky polypores. You can't really like pick a piece off and taste it. But usually for the most part, these saprotrophic polypores are not going to be toxic, but we'll talk a little bit about that in just a moment. Yeah, and just in case you didn't know, mushrooms are the above ground or out of substrate fruiting reproductive organs of a fungus. Kind of like we talked about in the life cycle. Binomial nomenclature, just we'll touch on it again. It's important. I really like to emphasize and support people calling organisms whatever they want. It's like, use a naming scheme that works for you. But when it comes to like describing different species of mushrooms across culture or across the world or in different places, and like putting them on a taxonomic organizational scale, binomial nomenclature is what we use. And there's good reason for it. They're usually very descriptive. It all comes from Latin, so we don't really know Latin that well, but when you start looking into it, it really gives a lot of insights. So for example, like Trametes versicolor, versicolor meaning many colors, and Trametes means one who is thin. So literally one who is thin with many colors. Seems to work. So it's a cool thing, but also don't let this like limit you from creating your own names, or even researching the ancestral names in your lineage of like what your ancestors called different mushrooms. It's endless. And when it comes to polypores, this is the one thing I wanted to touch on. There are a lot of medicinal polypores out there, and I hear a a common kind of myth that's thrown around that people say, oh, there's no known poisonous saprotrophic polypores, meaning there's no known poisonous polypores that like grow out of wood. And that's just not true. There's this one all the way to the right-hand side, you can see Hapalopilus nidulans, which is a known toxic saprotrophic polypore. So when it comes to like general sweeping statements in mycology, just always take it with a grain of salt. There are so many nuances that it's just really hard to like accept, oh, all of these mushrooms have this or all of these do that. There's way too many specifics for all or none statements. But the good thing is the family Polyporaceae is a really good place to start when it comes to foraging for medicinal fungi. They're usually pretty safe. They're pretty easy to identify. And they're just so beautiful. So the next time you're out walking around in a wet place, keep your eyes out for the underside of a lot of these mushrooms. And if you see little pores, then you might be looking at a member of Polyporaceae. There's also other fungi that have pores, but that usually are terrestrial, meaning growing out of soil, and that have a long stipe. And those could, be boletes like Borcini, but those are in a different family. So just keep your eyes out for these ones. And here's a beautiful example of different expressions of pores from both Polyporaceae and beyond.
Hey, Tay, a quick go back to the previous slide if you don't mind, please.
Yep.
Alyssa, is it the one on the right you're wondering about? The poisonous one? You can unmute or say in chat.
I was just wondering if you knew generally what habitat it was native to.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm surprised I didn't put it in here. Maybe I forgot. But from the research I did on it, it's actually technically native to all 5 continents besides Antarctica and where was the other one that it wasn't native to? But to
Greenland, maybe?
Huh?
Greenland, maybe?
Greenland's not a continent.
Well, big ass landmass. I don't know.
Landmass. To put it simply, basically all over the world, like anywhere that there's environment conducive for mushroom growth, it grows there. And it's also says that it grows on conifers and hardwoods. I've personally never seen it because I guess it doesn't really grow around here that often. It's more rare here, but in different regions of Europe and in the tropics, it tends to grow quite prolifically.
Thank you. That's very cool.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it'd be cool to come across one day. I'd be interested. Okay. So getting into the art and practice of being with all of these ones. And I changed the name of the slide to Feel Good Foraging because I was looking at it and I was like, what really is like ethical foraging? And how do we find a common ethos and a common set of ethics among like such a diverse practice that people engage with in like such unique ways? So for me, it's really just about like feel good foraging. How do we go out into the world and just genuinely feel really, really good about what we're doing? And knowing that like we're not doing harm. I would like to think that no one would feel good about doing harm. That's like at least the prayer that I have for us. So feel good foraging, what does that mean? And how do we engage with it within a set of common ethos, but also in our like own unique and beautiful way? And this isn't something I can teach you. It's something you have to figure out for yourself. But I can kind of, share what my set of ethics are and how I walk through the world in this way. So, first and foremost, remembering that we are harvesting the fruiting body of this fungal organism. And that being said, you can call it anything you want. You can call it the mushroom, you can call it the fruiting body, you can call it the sporocarp. it is that above ground, out of substrate, sexual reproductive organ. And I love to think of them, similarly as like fruits or flowers. They really are like such beautiful, colorful gifts that kind of just like come out of nowhere and are, in a way, for me, like beckoning our awareness and our relationship. So there's this big debate that always goes on when it comes to picking and cutting. And there's been a couple studies on this now, but the one that I most refer to is the often called the Swiss study, which was a 27-year longitudinal study that was done in Switzerland on these pretty large plots of land where they measured, like all like cutting in different areas and then picking in different areas and then not touching different areas. And they did that in these different ways. And they were working with chanterelles. They were working with Craterella species or Cantharella species, excuse me. And I'll just read this little quote to kind of sum it up at the end. The results reveal that long-term systematic harvesting reduces neither the future yields of the fruit bodies nor the species richness of wild forest fungi, irrespective of whether the harvesting technique was picking or cutting. So that right there is a pretty good indicator of like, it doesn't really matter whether you're picking the mushroom or cutting the mushroom. However, forest floor trampling does reduce fruiting body numbers. But this was an interesting piece. The data shows no evidence that trampling damaged the soil mycelia in the study time period. And that, raises a little question flag for me of having understanding of just like general soil ecology. If we're tromping through a super sensitive ecology that has like these layers of soft, bouncy forest stuff, and if we're just trampling through, it's going to cause compaction. And with compaction, it causes, less porosity in the soil, less ability for water to be held in the soil, less ability for microbes and other organisms to make their way through the soil. So I personally think that trampling or, walking through the forest in a hard way is going to have impact. I mean, everywhere we step is having some sort of impact. So that being said, it just kind of gives some light to the whole cutting versus picking debate, as well as the last little piece I'll add here is you're not going to harm the true vegetative body of a fungus by picking it. That mycelium is still going to be in the substrate doing their work. However, the potential repercussions are more like future-oriented long-term repercussions. If you go into a specific area and you take every single fruiting body that you see, you might be having an impact on the genetic diversity of future generations, because there's going to be a lot smaller spore load in that area and a lot less chance for the spores and the different mating types to meet and exchange genetics. So it's something to think about. It's something to use our future oriented human consciousness to think about. It's like, oh, maybe I shouldn't take everything I see here. All right, any questions before I move on to this next part?
I just
yeah, go for it.
The chat. Hi.
Hello.
Yeah, I had recently heard that picking could actually stimulate some mycorrhizal species. And it might actually produce a more fruitful harvest in some cases. I don't know if you've heard anything of that. I haven't seen any studies or anything about it.
Yeah, super interesting. Now that I think about it, the other study that is like a kind of well-referenced study about the whole picking versus cutting thing is a study that was done up in Oregon. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't have it like ripe in my mind, but I think one of the results of that, they were working with chanterelles as well. And one of the results came back with the the picking actually resulted in more abundant fruitings throughout the years. So maybe that's where that comes from. But it'd be really interesting to, to look into and to kind of understand more of the like mechanics around why that might be. Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna look into that. Thanks.
Yeah. So interesting. And something else I'll add in the picking brisk cutting is that feels important to say is, this is mostly the picking brisk cutting thing is for like fleshy bodied mushrooms where it's pretty easy to like pick a chanterelle out of the ground and or cut a chanterelle. But when it comes to like hard, woody polypores and bracket fungi like this, ideally you don't really want to like pick them because it's not just picking. It would be like ripping off of a tree or a log or something, and you actually might do some damage there by like taking off a bunch of bark that's like protecting the mycelium or taking a giant chunk of mycelium with you. So if you can, ideally, it's really nice to cut the mushroom. This has like a nice clean cut mark because that leaves a lot of the mycelium intact. And oftentimes, if you cut a polypore in a clean way, another fruiting body will just like fruit right out of that mycelial mat. And if you rip that off, that probably wouldn't happen. So another way to be in relationship with them.
Very cool. Are you going to talk about cutting from annual versus perennial polypores? Yeah. Okay, cool. Thank you.
Totally. Yeah, you already know it.
Hey, do you remember the name of that organ study? I'm just trying to find it right now so I can link it in the chat. Okay, if you don't,
I would just type in like cutting versus picking chanterelles Oregon study, like kind of all those keywords. I'm sure it'll pop up.
Is it 1986 to 1997? I thought it was longer than that.
I thought it was longer as well, and I thought it was more recent.
Okay, I'll keep looking. Okay.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Ray. Okay. So honorable harvesting. This rendition of kind of my process is definitely inspired by Robin Wall Kimmerer, bless her life. And if you don't know who Robin is, highly recommend looking into her work and just her as a person. She's absolutely amazing and has really inspired and informed the way that I walk through the world. And so in this process of honorable harvest and what I like to call regenerative ecological participation, what does that look like? And ultimately it will look different for everyone, but here's a little bit of my process. So I always go into the forest remembering that fungi, mushrooms are living sentient beings that are sensing, that are seeing literally via photoreceptors, that are exchanging information, that are holding genetic data, holding life information. So how do we honor their life and their gifts? How do we do that? Maybe it's just holding that awareness. Maybe it's offering something back. Maybe it's doing, maybe it's going into the forest many, many times and not taking anything until we hear that yes. Can look very different for all of us. Asking for permission and consent. This is a really fascinating topic for me because how do we do this, one, with other humans, and two, with organisms that don't speak a human language? What does this form of interspecies communication look like? And it can look different for all of us. One of the ways that it shows up for me, which is pretty psychedelic, is it will come in colors. So when I'm sitting with a patch of mushrooms, or I find like a big, beautiful medicinal mushroom that I intend to harvest, I'll sit with them. And oftentimes like I receive the yes as these like bright, beautiful, like yellows and blues and these like very warm, inviting colors that like beckon me closer. And no's will be these like big red like slashes, or like black like swords, like sword slashes almost. And it's pretty consistent. So that's one of the ways that I feel communication happening. And, you know, some people call me crazy and some people are like, wow, that's beautiful. So it just depends. It feels right for me. Yeah, like I said, tread lightly. The mycelium can feel you and they're sensitive. Despite what, you know, the study says, I do believe that compaction and trampling does definitely have an impact on these organisms. And know your mushroom. This is super important. So are they abundantly growing in your area? Are they native to your area? Are they invasive? That brings up a whole conversation around like, you know, what actually is an invasive fungus? What is a non-native fungus? How do we distinguish? Where do we draw boundaries and lines? Really interesting conversations. But just trying to be aware of knowing the mushroom. Are they abundant, or are you finding them in abundance in a certain region? Usually if they're in abundance, that is a sign of health. So that's a good place to move forward from. Do you have to cause a lot of disturbance to get to them? You know, do you have to like climb over a tree and down through a valley and through all this brush? And do you have to like make a huge impact to get to this mushroom? And if you do, you know, maybe you think twice. And to be completely honest, sometimes it's like kind of fun to see the like bright white oyster mushroom like way out in the distance and be like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go get that. But oftentimes I like to just kind of reorient and be like, maybe that's not mine, you know, it's not mine to get. Are they perennials or annuals? And yes, mushrooms can be perennial and annual. So for example, like we'll go into this specifically with the mushrooms, but Ganoderma applanatum, artist conch, these are perennial fungi, and turkey tails are annuals, as well as Ganoderma organense is an annual, meaning that these fruit bodies will just, you know, grow throughout one growing season. And then depending on how hard they are, the fruit bodies might stay throughout the year, but they will stop growing at a certain point. And then next year, a new fruit body will grow. They don't continue to grow from that same fruit body. But like Ganoderma applanatum, they will continue to grow and grow and grow from the same fruit body year after year after year. So perennial fungi can tend to be very old and get very, very large. And there's certain ways to be in relationship with them based on if they're annuals versus perennials. What food or shelter are they providing for other organisms? Lots of times when I'm out foraging, you know, there will be little other creatures living underneath those mushrooms. And like, for example, in these black trumpets, these Craterellus calicornicopioides, there was a little, I believe this was a like very dark skinned tiger salamander because they were quite large. And they had spots more along their body that you can't see. Someone else knows. I'm not an amphibian expert. But they were just hanging out under these mushrooms. And I was like, I am not going to take these. Like, this is that organism's home. And like, how would it feel for someone to just kind of like rip the roof off of your home as you're taking a nap? It wouldn't feel very good. So just always being aware of that. And what is the role, the ecological role or significance of this fungus? They all have significance and they all have roles. So just holding the question of what is this organism's particular role? And what stage of life are they in? You know, going from left to right here, this is Amanita calyptroderma, and they're like super fresh, like just kind of cresting out of their vulva, out of their egg sac. And some people, you know, would harvest these and say like, oh, this is the prime stage when they're like in their button form. But I like to wait a little bit. It feels wrong for me to pick a mushroom that has not at least like partially gilled out yet, because it's like they haven't been able to fulfill their like full life's destiny yet. as well as the middle pictures, Amanita muscaria. And they're just beginning to like gill out and crest in that way. And then over on the edge here, oh, is it not gonna play? Why no play?
The thing is moving, but
yeah, but the video's not playing.
Yeah.
Oh well, it's basically a beautiful video of these are some shiitake from our farm out in Green Valley Road, just 10 minutes from here. And they're growing outdoors, and it's a beautiful video of sunlight beaming on them, and you can just see these like beautiful waves of spores crusting through the sunlight. So yeah, you can see that, you know, there's a bunch of spores being released from that area, from that log. And if you want to see the video, our farm's Instagram has it on it, and it's really lovely to watch. Take only what you need and no more. What are you going to do with this medicine? So there's so many things you can do with fungi. You can make art with them, teas, seasoning salts, delicious, decadent foods. So just holding in mind, you know, like before you take a mushroom, you know, as you sit with it, really get clear of like, what am I going to do with this fruiting body? What am I going to do with this fungus? And take it away that does the least harm. So this is, you know, getting to that concept of perennial mushroom harvesting. So this was a beautiful, very large Ganoderma applanatum fruit body that I interfaced with up in Humboldt County. And because these fungi are perennial, there's a way in which you can take the medicine you need from them. So I just took my knife and kind of like sliced all around the outer ring of the fruit body, and then got like a decent amount of material. And then, you know, in a week to a couple weeks, the scar basically of this fruit body will completely close up with new fungal material, and it will just keep growing right from that area. So instead of like taking off the entire fruit body and then having the mushroom like completely start over again, or maybe it wouldn't even fruit again, in this way you can ensure that the mushroom will continue to grow and grow and grow. And in a way you can have a regenerative form of medicine. You know, if you had this in your backyard, for instance, this is something that you could go to year after year and just take a tiny amount and know that that mushroom would continue to grow back year after year. And you can take from different areas. And I have an idea of like, what would it look like to bonsai perennial fungi and actually like create shapes with them. I don't know if they would want that. So it's kind of a give or take type thing. But this is the way I like to be in relationship with perennial fungi. Cover up a picked mushroom with duff to protect the exposed mycelium beneath. This is just a nice practice. And if you're out foraging and you're seeing little like flecks of mushrooms everywhere, just take that and like put it back below the soil. This is going to give all the microbes and the bacteria and all the fungivores that eat mushrooms and fungus direct access to that food source. And one of my favorite things to do in the theme of regenerative ecological participation is propagating mycorrhizal fungi by burying their trimmings underneath host trees. So this is definitely going to call you into learning which species of fungus is associated with which tree. But specifically for the soft, fleshy-bodied mycorrhizal fungi, like our porcinis, our boletes, our matsutakes, our chanterelles, our black trumpets, our hedgehogs, our different edible species of amanitas. It's so much more. It's going to require you to know what trees they're in association with, which is pretty easy. You know, if you find one, you can just kind of look up and look around and see like, who are you growing under? And then what you can do is as you're trimming the base, as you're cleaning them up, you can take all those little trimmings which are really just specialized mycelium. All a mushroom is just specialized mycelial cells. And you can take all those trimmings, bring it over to a different host tree and dig a little hole and bury it. And hopefully, you are catalyzing the proliferation of that species of mycorrhizal fungi, which is benefiting the tree, benefiting the forest, benefiting the mushrooms. There's a lot of different benefits. And I've never found a study that like shows that this works. But, when we're out there doing this, it feels like it's doing something. And, when all else fails, like go with what you feel. And so it'd be cool. Raif and I both hold a dream of being able to actually like monitor this longitudinally over time in like in some type of like forest site. So stay tuned. Oh, the video isn't working again. Bummer. I don't know what's happening. It was just a cute video of Raif cutting up and making funny noises. Take only fresh fruiting bodies for food and medicine, avoid mold, decay, bugs, etc. Just use your senses, use your sensorium. Don't take turkey tail that have like orange slime mold growing all over it. Don't take any soft bodied mushrooms that have bug holes all over them, because there's probably a lot of maggots in those. But not all molds are bad. There is a specific type of ascomycete fungus called hypomyces that will parasitize other types of edible fungi, in some non-edible types of fungi, and turn them into alchemical magic. So for example, on the right-hand side, this is the lobster mushroom, Hypomyces lactiflorum. And originally they were Rastula brevipes, which is an edible mushroom, and they're pretty good. But when it's parasitized and taken over by this Hypomyces fungus, it turns into this deep orange, red, delicious mushroom that literally tastes like lobster. So being able to be aware in particular in what you're seeing. Carry your mushrooms in a basket or a porous basket. So you can also be a method of spore dispersal. This is an age-old knowing for any mushroom forager, but it's true. I mean, you can see sometimes if you're carrying a porous basket with mushrooms, you can, in the sunlight, you can see spores just like pouring off of them. So in a way, Raif likes to say that we are gifting our mobility to the fungus. And it's just a little thing that we can do while you're at it. Use in a timely manner, don't let a precious life go to waste. So know how to, dry your mushrooms, or in this case with different polypores that have a lot of little beetles that will eat through them. I like to put them in the freezer for about 3 days. And that once they're completely dried out, I'll put them in the freezer and then put them in storage, because it'll keep them really fresh for a long time. Like these reishi here in this little jar, I put in the freezer, and it really helps prevent the decay of the mushroom boring beetles. Unless, hopefully this works. Do you all see that? Yeah. Deliquescing Caprinus comatus. So beautiful. So this is just saying, unless you're intentionally wanting them to decay, which I do. Caprinus comatus is a delicious, edible, and medicinal mushroom when young. But as it gets older, within 24 hours, it will go through this process called deliquescing, and it will turn into black spore goo. And then I use that to make ink. And I make a lot of the art that I make with Caprinus comatus ink. So it's not always bad to let your mushrooms decay. There's some cool things that can come out of it. But for the most part, you don't want them to decay. And last but not least, where are your mushrooms growing, and from what substrate are they growing from? This is really important because many of you might know, but mushrooms are very, very good accumulators. That's literally how they get their nutrition. They accumulate nutrients and elements and chemicals from their environment through their body, and then often like filter those nutrients to their mushroom, to the mushroom itself, because that's where karyogamy, that's where that genetic coming together is going to happen. And there's a lot of nutrients that need to be present for that process to happen. So be aware. These little purple mushrooms, I actually don't know what they are. Were they tuberias? Do you remember, Ryan?
I don't remember. It does look very familiar though.
Anyway, those were growing out of a pot in my room with like out of this spine that I found in the forest. And I just thought it was the coolest thing ever.
That's why they look familiar. I was there.
You were there. Yeah. Yeah. These like beautiful purple mushrooms just started growing out of this, this vertebrae. And I was just mind blown. And then to kind of wrap that all up, before we go into our specific mushrooms, I just wanted to read this quote by Robin Wall Kimmerer, which says, "The next step in our cultural evolution, if we are to persist as a species on this beautiful planet, is to expand our protocols for gratitude to the living earth. Gratitude is most powerful as a response to the earth because it provides an opening to reciprocity, to the act of giving back." So I would love, for you to take away the feeling of that when you go out to harvest your own food or medicine, your own fungal food or medicine, of gratitude. How do we provide those opportunities for reciprocity and giving back through our gratitude? And that is for you to figure out. Okay, take a little pause. We're just behind the hour mark, so I am hoping to be done by like 8:45-ish and have some time for questions. Sometimes I'll go until the end, and then we'll kind of stay for questions after 9 o'clock, but I won't keep y'all for too long. But if you want to take a little stretch or a little breath, kind of integrate, ask any questions, I'm just gonna have a sip of water. So we'll take a very small little break. How's the chat looking, Raya?
It is good.
Great.
Up to date.
Up to date. Has there been any like juicy questions that you've answered that you want to share?
Oh yeah.
Thoughts?
Fly larvae juice.
Fly larvae juice?
Well, you said juicy questions.
Oh. I was like, wow, are people getting into like fly larvae juice fasts now?
No, it was a question about boletes and fly larvae.
Got it.
Alyssa, I did answer the question to catch you up was, do boletes have fly larvae pretty much as soon as they fruit? I find that the maggots will show up eventually. Discovered this on a backpacking trip, and I said that I find it mostly depends on the air and soil temperature, as in when it's warmer, insect reproduction increases and the chance goes up.
Totally.
Do you want to add anything to that? And that was the response to you, Alyssa.
Thank you. Thanks for answering that. You can just call me Moon too. I know.
Oh, Moon. Good. Hello.
Yeah.
Moon.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely, something I'll add to that is, and maybe you already said it to a degree, Raya, but I usually find that when it's really cold outside, like I remember in the beginning of last year, there was like a good rain, and then it was kind of warm, and then porcini started fruiting, and then it got really cold, and it kind of just like slowed the process so much, both of like the growth of the porcini, as well as I would find like very little to no porcini that we found had any bug damage. So
oh wow.
Yeah.
Ooh, okay.
Really cool.
Ideal conditions. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was really sweet.
Yeah, I wonder if we could even play with that, like looking in valleys or areas that are more exposed and think might be a little colder. I don't know if I could limit myself in such a way, but
Yeah, this
and then
was a trip
to
where it
follow
was
up.
just,
Oh, go ahead.
oh, sorry. Oh, I was going to say that makes a lot of sense because this was a trip where it was very warm in the Olympics and there were king bullets everywhere. It was incredible. But I think there was also a lot of insect activity, so that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, they definitely tend to go hand in hand.
And then Tay,
Yeah.
maybe we could, if we find the study, I couldn't find the specific one. I'm less familiar with it as well than the Swiss one, so maybe I did find it and I'm not sure it's the right one.
Okay.
But there are a few new studies we need to read, apparently, like typing in those keywords for Oregon. There are many publications now. They might be all like centered around this one study that we're thinking of, but
yeah, they might be like meta-analyses, but
yeah,
cool. New
yeah, or like
for
reposts and yeah.
Yeah.
I was about to start linking like everything I found on Oregon and chanterelles, and I was like, wait, no, this is a bad idea.
Yeah. Okay. Well, great. Lots of new information all the time. So let's start getting into the stars of the show, the mushrooms. First one we'll start off with is turkey tail, Trametes versicolor, one of my favorite mushrooms ever, and a really, really great mushroom to start off with as, if you're new to mushrooming in general, turkey tail is a really, really great kind of place to begin to gain that eye and that awareness. So Trametes versicolor, Trametes meaning one who is thin, and versicolor meaning many colors. As you can see, basically any true turkey tail, any true Trametes versicolor that you see, you'll see that they're usually very thin, and that they're diverse colors. This one isn't so colorful as the one that you see pictured here, but even you can see like within the mushroom themselves, there's many, many different shades and hues of these like creams and browns and oranges, and they're just so beautiful. This one is really spectacular. There's many different names. The old name is Coriolis versicolor, and this mushroom has been used in traditional Chinese medicine for a long, long time, many hundreds of years, and I believe it's pronounced Yunji. Correct me if that's wrong. I do not speak that language. But that's another name that it's often seen as in different traditional Chinese medicine formulas. This mushroom is saprotrophic, growing on dead and decaying hardwood and conifers, super common and abundant, found all over the world, in places that have moderate tropical to temperate climates. And it's an annual, so it'll fruit in the northern hemisphere, at least. It'll fruit in the fall with the first rains, growing with the rains. But then the fruit bodies can persist into the following year. And I've seen some really funky turkey tail where like the fruit body will grow and then it kind of will desiccate and dry up, but still remain. And then the following season, a new fruit body will kind of grow right off the old fruit body. So it made me question is that technically like a perennial if it's growing off of the same fruit body? But the growing style is definitely more annual. It's zonate, so it's growing in these concentric zones of color. The surface is finely hairy or velvety looking, which, if you had a feel sensor, you could feel the velvetyness of these ones here. And they always have a white spore print. And with turkey tail, you're also looking for the pure white or cream pores on the underside. They're going to have these really, really small, beautiful pores. And that's definitely a telltale sign that you are looking at true Trametes versicolor. And when it comes to the zonate concentric zones, I had this thought, I had this kind of like hypothesis epiphany not too long ago. And specifically like in turkey tails that you're seeing here in this picture, I was wondering if because each concentric zone is growing as the growing season progresses, I was wondering if each ring of color is holding a unique consortia of medicinal constituents. Because phenols, phenolic compounds, as we talked about in last class, they are the main compounds that give color or give pigment to mushrooms, but they also just happen to be a super powerful antioxidant in our body. So I'm curious if each concentric zone with different colors has like a differing concentration of antioxidants or specific antioxidants that are expressed or not expressed. But I don't know. It'd be really interesting to find out. And oh, they're just so beautiful. I just love them so much. They're so unique and diverse and dynamic. And even within like the same fruiting cluster, you can have like 100 different expressions of what they'll look like. But they're just so gorgeous. And talking about their medicinal constituents, so they're one of the most extensively researched medicinal mushrooms. There's on average, it's probably more now. There's over 400 clinical studies, but this is including in vitro studies, animal studies, and human studies. So last class, we also talked kind of about the difference of those two and how to be really aware of, is it in vitro study, meaning like in a petri dish? Is it an animal study or is it a human study? But for turkey tails, there's about 40 or so human clinical trials just for for cancer treatments. But most of these human clinical trials, unfortunately, are not actually done with the whole mushroom. They're done with the isolated polysaccharides of PSP and PSK. And these polysaccharides, these isolated polysaccharides, are actually prescribed anti-cancer medications in Japan and different regions of China. So we're still kind of lacking on the human clinical studies of whole body turkey tail mushrooms and the effects that they have. So what I'll go through here in all of these mushrooms is kind of a blend of the medicinal possibilities, so the medicinal actions that have been found in both in vitro, animal, and human. But by no means am I saying that everything that is listed here will happen in your body if you take turkey tail. That's just not going to happen. I don't want to say that it's not going to happen. It might, but the human body is so variable, and you need your own certain types of gut bacteria and a healthy microbiome to even access some of these constituents. So try to remember everything we were talking about last time and apply it to what we're talking about here. So a wide array of traditional uses from cultures all around the world, specifically in different regions of Asia. It is the highest in beta glucans by weight than any other mushroom. So the beta glucans, as you can recall, are the main polysaccharides, the fungal polysaccharides that are inherent in the body of the mushroom, in the fungal cell wall. That's going to give rise to that immunomodulation cascade. And so they're really, really, really good at catalyzing immunomodulation in the body, as well as acting as a prebiotic, because those beta glucans are food for a lot of healthy microbiota in our gut, in our gastrointestinal lining. The PSP and the PSK that are done in the studies are actually isolated from the mycelium of the turkey tail, which is really interesting. But the fruit bodies do also have those polysaccharides. Super rich in antioxidants. They have antibacterial actions, antiviral. They've been used traditionally as a styptic. A lot of the mushrooms we're going to talk about tonight actually have traditional indigenous uses as styptics. So like drying and powdering the mushroom and then rubbing them on open wounds or burns. They have anti-inflammatory action, immune modulating, anti-tumor, anti-diabetic, many different things, anti-hypertensive. They are used widely in the treatment against breast cancer. I think a lot of people know the famous story from Paul Stamets about like how he basically like healed his mother from breast cancer. It's a really actually beautiful and touching story. But yes, they are widely studied in different, tested on different cell lines of breast cancer. And they've been used quite rigorously in for their chemotherapeutic actions, just meaning they're taken in conjunction with people who are undergoing chemotherapy, with really incredible results of having higher survival rates, less pain, less negative symptoms from chemotherapy. They just really support the body if one is undergoing chemotherapy. Helps with the efficacy of antibiotics. It actually makes the bacteria more susceptible. Contains these mushrooms, since they're so high in beta glucans, they're really high in prebiotics that nourish that helpful bacteria in the gut. And vaginal canal. Anna Sitkoff talks about using turkey tail teas as douches because they actually help support the microbiota in the vaginal canal, which is beautiful, and I would recommend it. They increase circulation and aid in fever reduction. They're used in many dermatological and topical applications, specifically acne and eczema. And they can lower cholesterol levels, specifically in association with the astragalus root, which is a really cool study. I actually don't have it cited here, but I can follow up with that. And then there's a really cool study done by Wong et al. Combining red sage root, or danshen, it's called in TCM, with turkey tail for an increased immunomodulating effect. So the turkey tail and the red sage root together had a more potent immunomodulating effect than either of them alone. And this is just a cool chart from Christopher Hobbs' book, which is really wonderful, and I highly recommend it. I'll show it again. I talked about a lot of the books in part one, but this is a really great guide, specifically for like beginner intermediates, because it's just full of pictures and charts and really lovely and really like accessible and easy. This is the chart showing different beta glucan concentrations in these different mushrooms. And as you can see here, turkey tail with 60.8, I believe it's grams. I can't actually see the top of the chart right now. By dry weight, yeah, grams. Yeah, it's a lot. So they're super high in beta glucans, but not too far behind are sulfur tufts and reishi, Ganoderma species, as well as honey mushrooms, which is really interesting, as well as actually right behind turkey tail are porcini stipes with 58 grams per dry weight, which is really great. And I think he's doing it out of 100 grams. You can find it in his book. I can't remember the specifics. And just some pretty pictures of turkey tail, because I like making art with them, and they're so gorgeous. Oops. Lookalikes. So turkey tail definitely have some lookalikes, but none will hurt you. Everything in the Trametes genus is really benevolent, I would say. And they're also medicinal, just under research. So you're not really going to find a lot of medicinal research on other Trametes species, but other Trametes species are really, really abundant, and I like to work with them as medicine. All have a white spore print. And Anna Sitkoff has a lot of really beautiful, like a whole paper written on the different members of Trametes, and goes into like the different research. So I highly recommend going to her website, reishi&rosesbotanicals.com, and she just has so much incredible information. She's one of my main mentors in the medicinal mushroom world. First one, Trametes betulina, aka the gilled polypore. This is one I see all the time, and I always get the question like, oh, is that turkey tail? But the easiest way to distinguish it is if you look underneath, they have gills, and they have true gills, which is really interesting, which is why they're called the gilled polypore. But they're still in the family Polyporaceae. They've just evolved to have gills for some reason. They just wanted to do it. And Trametes betulina, I when I make medicine with it, when I make tea with it, I get the same feelings as I do with turkey tail. I feel that kind of like subtle immunomodulation, and my gut's always really happy. So I think that this mushroom has a lot of untapped potential to be like a really beautiful and widely used medicinal mushroom. And the research that does exist, it's mostly all in vitro studies, but it shows antioxidant, cytotoxic, antimicrobial, antiviral, and anti-inflammatory, and hypoglycemic actions. So that's Trametes betulina. And then some other Trametes and Trametes lookalikes are Trametes hirsuta, Trametes ocraceae, Trametes pubescens, and Bajircandera adusta. I love saying that name. And these are all turkey tail lookalike organisms, but they all have their own nuances. Sometimes they can look really, really similar to turkey tails, but they're just always going to be a little bit different. Trametes hirsuta is going to have like more of like a shaggy, bristly cap. Trametes pubescens is going to have like much more hair. And both of these are usually like white or gray. They don't really have a lot of color. Trametes ocraceae is usually going to be like browns or oranges. And Bajircandera adusta, they have like the dark, smoky gray pores underneath. So all of these are great, and they're super common and abundant, and yeah, just not really ever used. So much of the focus is on turkey tail, but I think the diversity of these species really holds a lot of medicinal potential. And then what some people call like the true false turkey tail. I don't even really like to use the word false turkey tail because we're comparing it to another organism and then saying you're not that organism, instead of honoring this organism in its glory and in its uniqueness. But its colloquial name is false turkey tail. But I've been kind of shifting away from that. This is Sterium, either Ostrea or Hirsuta in this area. And it's going to lack the white porous underside. It's going to be this like flat, creamy, either orange or brown on the underside. And it can look definitely like turkey tail from above, but as soon as you look underneath, you'll see that it doesn't have those white pores. And that's really when you know, oh, I'm looking at Sterium. And oftentimes Sterium will be found in the same habitat as Tremella, the like orange jelly fungus, because the Tremella is actually predating on the Sterium mycelium. And these are shown to have, in vitro studies, have antifungal and antimicrobial properties. Ganodermas. I'm going to mostly focus on Ganoderma applanatum because it's the most abundant in the area I live and kind of in the general Bay Area. But I know for folks who live in different areas, there are probably other reishi that are much more abundant than the applanatum or brownie eyes. They're so pretty. And this is a beautiful picture where you can really see the perennial nature of them, of all the different layers of growth happening in this like beautiful swirling manner and stacking manner. So this is, the applanatum is kind of like the temperate cousin of some of the more popular subtropical Ganoderma species. Ganoderma really just means shiny skin, gano, shiny, derma, like dermis, epidermis, meaning skin. And then applanatum means flattened. Brownie eye is just the name of a dude who distinguished the different species. And the way to tell applanatum versus brownie eye in this area is Ganoderma applanatum will be flat, so applanatum flattened, and brownie eye, as you can see in the bottom right-hand picture, will be stacked. So they're different species according to their morphologies. So these are the perennial mushrooms, living upwards to 50 years. I have some mycological mentors that have met about 50-year fruiting bodies. And they will display growth rings just like trees. So you can see, you know, in this brownie eye, like each one of those stacks is a different year that it has grown. And in the applanatums, you can see it in kind of the concentric rings. They are saprotrophic, very, very, very common throughout the Western North America, found on dead and dying hardwood trees mostly. And in this area, in like the Bay Area or North Bay area, we mostly find them, actually pretty much all the time find them in association with living California bay, which I find so fascinating. And from what I've heard, it's because the applanatum is eating out the heartwood of the bay while the bay is still able to live. So cool. A lot of people see them as parasitic because of that, but it's not really actually killing the tree. It's just kind of like gnawing away at the internal structural heartwood, which could compromise the tree, but it's not actively killing the tree. And a lot of times I've heard this being put in kind of like, oh, like forest pathogen because it's growing on living trees, but I don't see them as pathogenic. They have white spores. All the Ganodermas have, no, I'm sorry, not white spores. They have a white porous underside, but they have like brown, creamy, cinnamony colored spores, which you can often see on the top of the fruiting body. And it's cool because those mushrooms will kind of form their own air currents. And that's why the top of the mushroom is usually covered with these like cinnamon spores, is because those spores are like flying upwards because the mushrooms are creating their own air currents based on temperature differences. Really fascinating biomechanics if you ever want to look into that. And it's called the artist conch because a lot of people will actually harvest them to like draw on the undersurface. But I don't recommend that because they're just such powerful and potent medicine. And it just depends. Some people, art is also powerful and potent medicine, but I personally don't use them for canvases. And reishi, so much I could say about reishi. What I'm going to describe here is kind of touching on reishi as a colloquial name, which can mean many, many different types of species. But these are just kind of like the general actions of reishi, whether it's Ganoderma applanatum, Ganoderma organense, Ganoderma lucidum, Ganoderma curtzii, Ganoderma tsugae, Ganoderma polychromum. They all have these kind of very similar constituents. But most of the studies that we get this information from has been done with quote unquote Ganoderma lucidum, even though Ganoderma lucidum could and has been suspected to mean like anywhere from 6 to 8 different species, because we just don't know which one is which. It's kind of messy. But yeah, one of the most widely studied mushrooms. It's been used in traditional Chinese medicine for thousands of years. It's called the ancient Lingzhi is how I've heard it pronounced, meaning spirit plant. But as we know, they're not plants. In TCM, it's used for indigestion, to stop pain, to remove heat, specifically from the digestive system, as an antibiotic, as a cancer treatment, and as well as altitude sickness, which I thought was interesting. And different species are associated with different colors. So there's like the red reishi, there's a yellow reishi, there's a black reishi, there's a green reishi. And all of those different colors are associated with different organs. I don't know them by heart, but it's really cool to look into. And there's so many different actions that Ganoderma species can provide. They are used as styptics, antibacterial, analgesic, meaning stopping pain, immune modulating, anti-tumor, antiviral, hypoglycemic, anti-inflammatory, anti-angiogenesis, meaning can help cancer cells literally like stop from growing and receiving nutrients in blood, as well as a liver protectant. In the main constituents that we're working with in the genus of Ganoderma is ganoderic acids. And ganoderic acids are a type of triterpene that are really powerful to protect against herpes virus, as well as a really powerful antihistamine. So when allergies are coming about, drink your reishi tea, and they can really help prevent that histamine response in the body. They also help provide a clear mind feeling, anti-inflammatory, cancer cell apoptosis, meaning like literally destroying cancer cells. That was an in vitro study on different cancer cell lines, as well as a prebiotic. And there's about 316 different triterpenoids that have been identified in Ganoderma species across the board, which is a whole lot. And each one of those triterpenes is going to have like their own specific effects in the body. One of the big things that reishi can do is help metabolize cortisol. And we went into this pretty deep in part 1, but just a reminder, cortisol being the stress hormone. And when cortisol is really high in the body, there's all sorts of different negative effects that can happen, specifically with sleep. And cortisol is an immune suppressant. So it also controls our fight or flight response, many different things. And so because reishi can actually modulate the organ axis of which that happens and the amount of the cortisol hormone, it's considered like a true adaptogen. Reishi is a cardiovasodilator, so it opens the blood vessels around the heart and in the body, increasing blood flow, moving stagnancy throughout the body, and nourishing what's called the Shen energies, which is the yin heart-centered energies. Can reduce blood glucose, cholesterol, triglyceride levels to help with the treatment of diabetes. And because it regulates cortisol, it can regulate sleep, including insomnia, fatigue, and associated anxieties and depressions. Just a really powerful heart-centered mushroom that has so many different interwoven medicinal actions. And it's really working on like a subtle level in the body too. A lot of people who, want to take reishi to like feel better, and then they start, consuming reishi, and then they're like, oh, well, I don't feel anything. It's because the medicinal constituents of mushrooms are working on like the deepest cellular and biological level. So they're working with our bodies. So usually when we feel something, it's because something is rapidly altering the chemistry of our body. But when something's actually working with the chemistry and biology of our body, we're probably not going to feel it. Yet we are going to feel it in the like long-term perennial benefits that we receive that are, more subtle and long-term. And I'll leave it for there. And I already spoke to this. I meant to take the slide out, but this is the harvesting practice that I use with Ganoderma applanatum.
A quick question, Tay.
Oh, totally.
On any dosage recommendation for reishi in dry form, and elaborating on dry form too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I went through this in part 1, but the average dose that like a healthy person would take for preventative medicine is about 3 grams dried per day on average. Does that help? Okay, great. But of course, the dosage can change based on if you're like dealing with an ailment or if you are getting sick. The easiest way to dose mushrooms is by making a really concentrated tea and just, kind of continuously drinking that all day. But it's kind of hard to lose track of the dosage. But since mushrooms have such a high safety profile, you're not going to necessarily negatively overdose on mushroom medicine unless you're literally drinking like gallons of really strong reishi tea a day. So I wouldn't worry about overdosing. So the genus Ganoderma contains about 80 species, and 16 of them are in North America. And like I said, Christopher Hobbs says it well, until further study, we can't definitely say that a particular species is more effective than another for treating particular diseases or symptoms. So any of these reishis, these Ganoderma species, could be just as efficient, if not more, than the Ganoderma lucidum for treating different ailments. But here's just a a couple. This is Ganoderma organense. This is the actual mushroom that's in that picture, just kind of old and dried. Let's see if I can get it at the right angle. Yeah, there you go. Same mushroom. Really beautiful one. And then this is Ganoderma lucidum that we grew at our farm, just a little baby. And then this is supposedly Ganoderma polychromum. It's hard to tell from organense. It could just be a weird morphology. But yeah, many different types of reishi. And the ones that we have here are mostly going to be applanatum, organense, and polychromum. I'll skip over that for now.
And a brownie eye.
And brownie eye, sorry, thank you. Red-belted conch. So this is another one of my favorites. And Fomitopsis pinicola. And supposedly they just changed the name to Fomitopsis montiaceae. I don't even know the new name, but I love the name pinicola because pinny means pine and it grows on pine. So it's so nice. Also called the red-banded polypore, very, very common throughout temperate conifer forests of the Northern Hemisphere. Also a saprotroph, you'll find it growing on pines and sometimes other conifers. It's actually pretty ubiquitous. It's also a perennial, so it'll grow year after year off of the same fruit body. And it's recognized by this red belt. So it has this really beautiful red belt that can come in many different shapes and colors and sizes. This is one that my friend gave to me. This one has a really thick red belt here, but sometimes they have very little to no red belts. So it's nice to kind of have a deeper layer of identifying these ones. White pore surface, and it does not stain brown when scratched. So like Ganoderma applanatum, if you scratch the bottom of it, it will stain brown. But these ones do not stain when they're scratched. And it has a white spore print. And it's been used as a styptic and a wound healer by many indigenous peoples throughout North America, throughout the Northern Hemisphere, and was also smoked with tobacco by the Diné people to treat headaches, which I thought was very fascinating. I found that out in the fungal pharmacy. Contains lanostane triterpenes and fomitopicides, which are terpenes that have direct anti-cancer and antibacterial action. They have direct cytotoxic effects in the body. And it has anti-inflammatory action, antihistamine, antioxidant, anti-cancer, and is also used as a liver tonic. Reduces inflammation of the digestive tract and helps support gut health. So as you can see, there's a kind of a common theme between a lot of these mushrooms is like really supporting the immune system, supporting the GI tract, and acting as a prebiotic because they all have those beta glucans. It's been reported that it can treat fevers, headaches, neuralgia, diarrhea, and jaundice. Those are all from in vitro studies. And the volatile oils in this mushroom have been used in cosmetic products. So supposedly helping with moisturizing and circulation stimulating properties in the skin. And here's a really beautiful photo of guttation, which is basically mushroom sweat. But as the mushroom expels this water, it can often take a lot of the different constituents with it. So I like to lick guttation when I see it in the wild. And here's some other photos of red-belted polypore, just the different expressions. So they can be like really kind of brown or they can be bright pink. This is split gill, Schizophyllum commune. And I'll just go through this one really quick because I don't often use it for medicine, but it's really, really abundant in this area. And I want people to know that it is a medicinal mushroom. So it's a saprotrophic mushroom, really easily identified by this kind of like fuzzy white cap and these gills underneath, these beautiful fractal kind of fanning gills. And schizo means split, and you can see kind of how the gills are almost split underneath. growing on hardwoods, conifers, all throughout any suitable environment all over the world. And it comes out as soon as it starts raining, and the fruiting bodies will often persist throughout the year, but they'll dry up after it dries. And they can be like whitish or pinkish or grayish, and their spore print is white to off-white. These mushrooms are used in a lot of culinary around the world. So specifically in Mexico, India, Asia, Africa, they're used as a meat substitute. So the fruiting bodies are harvested and like chopped up and kind of stirred into different recipes. And traditional uses in Mexico for reducing fever and inflammation. It has anti-tumor, anti-inflammatory, antibacterial, antiviral, immune modulation, and anti-cancer actions. One of the most studied polysaccharides in this mushroom is schizophyllin, which is researched for its anti-cancer properties, used as a chemotherapeutic and a treatment for chronic fatigue syndrome. Human trials to test this were actually using injections, and the oral consumption is an animal trial. So that also gives like kind of a skewed understanding of like, oh, well, it has these actions in humans, but that's because the schizophyllin, which is an isolated polysaccharide, was injected into the human body, not eaten. Maybe it would have a different effect if it was actually eaten. And it's used commercially in Japan for cervical cancer, the isolated polysaccharide. Rosy polypore. This is Rhodophobes cajunderi, another like super kind of underappreciated mushroom in the Bay Area bioregion. This is a saprotrophic species that's found usually on conifers. Sometimes it's parasitic on living trees, found widely throughout the North American conifer forests. They fruit fall to early winter and can persist throughout the summer. And they have an off-white spore print with this beautiful pale to pinkish rosy pore surface. And when they're fresh, they can really be like malleable like flesh, and they look like flesh. They're incredibly soft and feminine and kind of like look like vaginal tissue to me, which is really beautiful. And they just have a beautiful like feminine quality to them. And there's not too much on this mushroom besides the incredible work that Anna Sitkoff has done and is doing. This is the mushroom that she researched in at Bastyr to get her degree. And she has an incredible story about this mushroom that's really deep and emotional. So I recommend listening to her podcasts, specifically the one on mushroom revival. She talks about her journey with Rhodophobes cajunderi. And what she found is that it has direct cytotoxic effects on lymphocytic leukemia cell lines when made in a hot ethanol extract. But in the water extracts, the polysaccharides, have, why is this being weird? Sorry. My screen. Oops. Okay, back. They have anti-carcinogenic, immune modulating, and digestive aid effects, as well as they have some antibacterial properties. But under researched, underutilized. I definitely don't know really anyone else that's working with this medicine besides Anna. And then the last one we'll really get deep into is lion's mane. Hericium erinaceus. I've really haven't found too many Hericium, unfortunately, in our area. But you know, they're here and they will come. I would like to find more. Hericium erinaceus both points towards hedgehogs, which is really interesting. So Hericium is like pertaining to hedgehogs, and erinaceus is the genus of hedgehogs. So it's like hedgehog mushroom. Usually solitary growing, and they're saprotrophic. fruiting normally on oaks or dead or dying hardwoods, fruiting from late summer to winter, about Thanksgiving time in our region. And it's really hard to misidentify this one or mistake it for anything else. It's a big, white, firm, puffy poof ball of love. And it has little teeth that can get like really, really long. And there's some other species that grow in this region. The East Coast cousin is Hericium americanum. And then the one that I've actually found here most often than Hericium erinaceus is the Hericium coralloides, which is like the coral fractaling mushroom, which is so gorgeous. And you can use them like almost interchangeably with Hericium erinaceus, at least in cooking. And yeah, really sought after edible mushroom, and it's really delicious. Kind of tastes like seafood. I'm in a like place right now where I'm questioning whether I actually have an allergy to eating them, which is really, really sad, because the past about like 5 times that I've eaten Hericium erinaceus, when I've eaten them fresh, I've gotten really, really severe stomach aches after. So I'd be really sad if I had a particular allergy to this one, but it happens. So we'll see. And there's so much to talk about when it comes to this mushroom. I won't go into everything here, but basically to sum it up, it's a powerful nootropic mushroom with a lot of animal and in vitro studies pointing to these 2 triterpenes, hericenones and erinaceans, that stimulate this, the NGF, which is the nerve growth factor in the brain, which is involved in the regulation of growth, maintenance, proliferation, and survival of certain target neurons in the brain. But these results of the NGF were only found in animal studies. There's actually been, maybe this has changed, but at least in the past couple of years, there's never been a human clinical trial done that shows that Hericium erinaceus is actually supporting neuron growth in the brain, which I thought was really interesting. That all comes from animal studies. And with that being said, there is a lot of human clinical trials that are showing more how the gut-brain communication, this like bidirectional gut-brain communication, actually might be the reason why lion's mane has like so many effects on our cognition and on the brain and on preventing neurodegenerative disease and on reducing Alzheimer's and helping with mood support and all these different things. There's a lot of really interesting hypotheses and research coming out that shows because lion's mane actually supports the gut so well and like feeds and nourishes our microbiota so well that it's that is stimulating the mental health, for lack of a better word. It's also been used as a styptic for different indigenous peoples around the world. And this is kind of what I was talking about that bidirectional brain gut pathway. And this is from Anna's website. Once again, she has a very beautiful paper about it. And she says that decreasing inflammation and regulating the gut microbiome reduces anxiety and stress, and reduced anxiety and stress decrease inflammation and regulates the gut microbiome, because they're both so directly intercorrelated. So there's all of these different pathways that are kind of like creating these feedback loops that are helping one another. She calls lion's mane a true psychobiotic, which is a medicine that affects the psyche by regulating the gut microbiome. And I just think that's so brilliant, a psychobiotic, because as I said, we're realizing more and more and more that there's really no difference between what's happening in the quote unquote brain and what's happening in the gut, in the GI tract. So lion's mane is really good for kind of stimulating those pathways, as well as like tapping into the vagus nerve, which is responsible for our parasympathetic response. And lion's mane can really activate the parasympathetic nervous system, which is responsible for the rest and digest state. I'm gonna whiz over honey mushrooms real quick because we're running out of time, but you can always go back and look over them. And these next couple slides are just kind of like short tidbits on a bunch of other types of medicinal mushrooms that are soft-bodied fleshy mushrooms that you can find and forage for or buy at the grocery store and eat. And we think of them as edible mushrooms and not necessarily medicinal mushrooms, but they are highly medicinal, just if not more so than a lot of our medicinal polypores. And it's great because you can eat them. And I like to say, basically, if a mushroom is edible, it's medicinal inherently. Yeah, I don't think I necessarily have enough time to go into detail on all of them, but you can see here that, for example, oyster mushroom, it has different polysaccharides, pleurin, which is being studied for a lot of antiviral actions, and lovastatin, which is a powerful substitute for cholesterol-lowering statin drugs. So really, really good at lowering non-beneficial cholesterol in the body. And it's highest in ergothioneine by weight. And if you were at part 1, we talked a lot about ergothioneine and all the great stuff that it does. Porcini, also really medicinal, all the different types of what we call porcini, which are actually a species complex, super high in beta glucan, specifically in the stipe, has anti-tumor, antioxidant effects, also high in ergothioneine. Shiitake, been studied in traditional Chinese medicine for a long time and is given as a medication in certain regions of Asia. Many human clinical trials around shiitake, even chanterelles. They're really, really high in vitamin D and high in vitamin A. They have immune and inflammatory modulation, as well as topical wound healing. There's a lot of different like topical applications for these mushrooms. Bluets also have incredible amounts of medicinal properties. They are anti-tumor, have antioxidants, as well as high in trehalose, trehalose. Sorry, I mispronounce that all the time. Trehalose, which can help prevent the degeneration of cells, basically. It's a compound that's often used in like freezing organs and like preventing the degeneration of organs. What's that called again? Chiro, I'm not remembering. Cryopreservation or something. And Amanita muscaria, could talk about that mushroom for a long time. Both its entheogenic properties, which I've personally experienced myself and has been used by my ancestors in Scandinavia for hundreds, if not thousands of years. The triterpenes that are extracted in alcohol are being used topically for neuromuscular conditions. And then homeopathically, it can be taken internally for nervous tremors, especially Parkinson's. It's actually being studied quite a lot for different applications, being taken homeopathically for Parkinson's. Tremella species, helping to lower cholesterol, can reduce respiratory inflammation and asthma, also immune modulation, can be used topically for pain relief, as well as it has this beautiful, cool, moistening skin elasticity property, which I love to in the field. I'll just find like cool, moist tremella and just rub it all over my skin. And then it can also be very soothing for stomach ailments. And Western cauliflower, also has a whole swath of different medicinal actions. The polysaccharides have potential for neurodegenerative disease treatment, hypertension treatment, improvement of skin conditions, anti-angiogenesis in lung cancer cell lines. So basically, it prevents the feeding of cancer cells, and photo protection of skin. So can act as like basically a sunscreen. And all these different edible medicinal mushrooms are so, so great. And I'm sure I'm actually quite positive that every single one of these have their own unique medicinal actions. And they're so yummy and so fun. This is a chart by Anna Sitkoff, once again, kind of breaking down the different levels of some of these common Pacific Northwest medicinal fungi. Highly recommend looking into these if you're interested in like the more specific constituents and what they're doing. And then, you know, I can't give a medicinal mushroom class without giving a shout out to the psilocybes. Very, very powerful medicine. Take with caution and with kindness and with awareness. And there's many native and naturalized species of psilocybes in the Pacific Northwest, including Psilocybe cyanescens, Psilocybe lenii, Psilocybe semilenziata, and Psilocybe azurescens, and Gymnopolis ludifolius, and other species that also contain the compound psilocybin and psilocin. And you know what I'll say about these, I could speak at length about them and about my experiences and about how to be with them, but learn the history. You know, what are the lineages that are held within these fungi? Do your research, trust your source, pay attention to set and setting when you are imbibing this medicine. Pay very close attention to dosage, because not all species of psilocybes have the same amount of psilocybin in them. Some are much, much more concentrated and potent than others. And then integration, that is so important to really like weave in these experiences into your life in a good way and stay stabilized within the experiences. And some resources I'll recommend is the San Francisco Psychedelic Society. I've worked closely with them, and they have a really great web and net of resources to help you in your journey if you decide to go on a journey with these ones. MAPS is a great resource as well. The Psychedelic Association, which is worldwide. Michael Pollan has a lot of psychedelic resources and an actual website called Psychedelic Resources. Arrowid is a great website to do deep dives into other people's experiences and be connected in the community. And there are many, many books about these incredible medicinal fungi. And last but not least, deadly species and what to look out for. In teaching mushroom walks and like guiding mushroom hikes, I always recommend, if you know the deadly species in your area really, really, really well, then that's a huge way to feel really safe in mushroom foraging. Because, if you see a deadly species, then you can just be like, oh, nope, that's a deadly, and I'm not gonna mess with it. So in this bioregion are 4 main, like really emphasized deadly species. There are more, not very much more, but the main ones to look out for are Amanita ocreata, the Western destroying angel, mycorrhizal with oaks, Amanita phalloides, the death cap, which are highly invasive actually. They came over here from Europe on the roots of cork oaks. And Galerina marginata, the funeral bell, or deadly Galerina, and then Foliotina rugosa. And I definitely recommend, if you want to start foraging for yourself, learn your deadlies. And this is a really great resource for those of you in the Bay Area, in the coastal redwood ecologies. Go to this book and know your deadlies. And one more quote from Robin to kind of finish us off is, action on behalf of life transforms. Because the relationship between self and the world is reciprocal, it is not a question of first getting enlightened or saved and then acting. As we work to heal the earth heals us. And some resources for identification. These books are super groovy, super rad, specifically for greater Bay Area bioregion. Mushrooms of the Redwood Coast, so great. Literally my go-to for in the field studies. California Mushrooms is also a great comprehensive guide, Mushroom Demystified, classic. And then for like a larger scope of Pacific Northwest mushrooms is the Mushrooms of the Pacific Northwest. But I recommend, based on where you are, getting a field guide that's more specific to which bioregion you're in. Like this one, for example, is only just the tiny strip of Sequoia sempervirens ecologies along this coastline. And look at how thick it is. It's incredible. So bioregional specific. More resources is iNaturalist, Mushroom Observer. Facebook pages are great places to both post your pictures of mushrooms and get ID help. The California Mushroom Identification Forum and Mushroom Hunters of California are two specific ones. Like, people are on it. You post a picture and you'll usually get responses in like minutes. And then send pictures to me, and I want to help you identify and help walk you through processes of, making medicine or utilizing the fungus. I really want to be on this journey with you because it helps me learn too. And then for medicinal mushrooms, these are my favorite resources, my favorite books. And then, as you can, read, Anna Sitkoff. She is such a guide and mentor for me. She's absolutely incredible, and I know most of what I know about medicinal mushrooms from her, honestly, as well as all these books. And Jason Scott with Feral Fungi, super groovy, makes incredible spagyric tinctures and holds beautiful alchemical wisdom. Reishi Strauss with Earth and Spirit Botanicals. Dear Sister, that is doing incredible work with medicinal fungi. I make medicinal mushroom medicine and have a whole line on my Etsy site, which you can find on my Instagram and on my website, as well as Malama Mushrooms, great medicinal mushroom resource. And then local mushroom farms, Moonfruit if you're in Sebastopol, and then some others in the Bay Area. And that's it. And you'll get these slide decks. So if there's anything that you couldn't write down or need to look back over, especially on the resources page and stuff, it'll all be there for you. Done.
Yay.
Yay.
Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing your knowledge. It was wonderful.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here. Yay, look at all these cool humans.
Yeah, thank you for that presentation. That was very comprehensive, and I appreciate the respect that you bring to the foraging and the asking. And that's a neat, I think, kind of a missing element that we think is part of the process.
Thanks for that feedback. Yeah, I definitely think it's a missing piece, but one that we are collectively slowly starting to remember again.
Right.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. Yeah. So talk to your mushrooms, even if people think you're freaky and weird. Talk to them.
Yeah.
They will talk back. I
do. I talk to mine. I grow, and they definitely. There's a vibration there for sure.
Yeah. Absolutely. Beautiful. Thank you so much, everyone. Any burning questions that didn't get answered, or anything that you want me to elaborate on, or anything that you want to share, or stories you want to tell? I'm super curious to hear others speak.
I think I had a question just on the porcini. Does anyone grow those, or do you have to forage them?
That's a great question. From my understanding, they're mycorrhizal fungi. They're ectomycorrhizals, meaning they have inherently a very complex relationship with the roots of living trees. And for the most part, we humans have not been able to figure out how to cultivate mycorrhizal species because it's just too ecologically complex, because it's it's not just the tree and then the fungus. There's also, it's the role of the bacteria and the different protists that are also like weaving into that relationship. But the other day, it was on Instagram. I can't remember who it was, but there was this post of this, my mind's going blank, not trellis. What are they called? Trough. This big metal trough full of soil and these little pine saplings and then little porcinis popping out of the soil. And I was like, what's going on there? So I clicked on it and read, and supposedly this dude figured out how to cultivate Boletus edulis by inoculating the roots of these pine saplings with spore slurries and then planting them. But like, I don't want to like call BS, but I'm highly skeptical. Because usually these relationships take many years to develop. But maybe he did it. I don't know.
Yeah.
But that's my story on that.
Yeah, kind of like chanterelles are the same way, right? We just haven't cracked the code. Yeah. They're too complex.
Yeah. And I mean, there's ways that we can kind of like ecologically cultivate them. For example, if you're doing like oak woodland restoration, I've been involved in a project where there was like a bunch of live oaks being planted, which is one of the California chanterelles like favorite host associate. And all the live oak saplings that we planted, we dipped in spore slurries of chanterelles and then planted those. So maybe that forest will be booming with chanterelles one day. Hard to know. But those are more, like mysterious long-term styles of cultivation. But still there.
Gabriel, on that question, I did put a bit of what Taylor was talking about there in the chat.
Oh, you did? I was looking, I just didn't hear a response. Sorry.
Maybe scroll down, or I think I put it there.
Does it say, direct message? May have to click on that to.
Oh, did I do a direct? No, I did it to everyone. I can resend it anyway. Taylor mentioned this galvanized tub or whatever trough that we saw online somewhere.
Yeah.
And if I recall correctly, it was with spruce and somewhere in the Pacific Northwest. But the same concept as is being used in truffle farms, which are becoming more popular. And I bet, like, now that we're starting to see it, say in the last 5 years or so, now that we're starting to see success with truffle farms, we're likely going to see a diversification of these ectomycorrhizal species. And in my understanding, the people really making all the money so far are the people growing the inoculated trees. One person in particular, I'm blanking on his name right now, but there are in California 20 truffle farms, and this one person, one business grew all the trees for 17 of those 20 farms. So he's definitely doing well. His company, whatever the name is. But anyway, point being, I bet we'll start to see it more with these other species that are highly prized, highly valued edibles. And on the timeline too, the average year of like first harvest, from what I remember, for the truffle farms was about 10 years. So like, it's a hefty investment to make on such a wild gamble that it's not going to be like get rich quick kind of thing for any of these projects.
Right. Are you familiar with the nursery? It's a great one in somewhere in Oregon. They're called One Green Earth or One Green.
Yeah, I've heard of them.
They have, I just saw for the first time last year, they're selling trees that are inoculated with truffle mycelium, and they're super expensive, but I was tempted, but it's too dry where I'm a little inland actually from San Luis Obispo, but it was just neat to see. I was excited that was like available, in a small lot.
Yeah, super cool.
Yeah.
Did you say San Luis Obispo? That's I was asking in chat too.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so go to. I used to live in Los Osos. Okay. Go to the Oak Woodland Reserve, or the Los Osos Oak Reserve, I think is the name. It's right on the what is that, the
Los Valley Road.
Yeah. That's the one. Go there, or Montana de Oro. There, I found porcini there in my first year of looking.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yeah,
cool.
that's the place to go in your area. I mean,
All
of
right.
many, and that's why I was asking where you live. Basically, learn your host trees, and then there you have it.
Mhm.
Yeah, something must have got screwy with the chat, because it was weird. I responded and it shows on my end, but I guess it didn't go through on your end. So, oh well, that gives me hope. Thank you that they're actually in my area. So cool, very good. I'll let someone else talk.
Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
Anyone else? I have a little extra beat that I'll share about the mycorrhizal tree inoculum. If no one else wants to talk. Yeah, cool. Well, I was kind of bummed because actually last weekend I was supposed to go up to Oregon to visit Jay Schindler at Fungi for the People, because he was hosting an arbuscular mycorrhizal cultivation workshop. And I've been trying to get into this thing for 3 years. And the first year it was fire, and the second year was COVID, and the third year it was like COVID and fire. And I was just like, meh. And so I thought this one was going to happen, and it unfortunately ended up being canceled again. But that being said, something that I think is going to take off, and for a good reason, not just for like commodification, but for actual like seeding the future of ecosystem resilience, is like arbuscular mycorrhizal and ectomycorrhizal inoculated nursery trees. And Raif and I have been kind of playing around with this idea of like, what if we started a nursery, specifically for landscape restoration and reforestation, and every single plant was inoculated with the spore slurry or mycelium of its ectomycorrhizal or arbuscular mycorrhizal partner. So when you're planting that tree, you're not just planting a tree, you're planting the ecology of what that tree needs to be more resilient and drought tolerant and healthier and have a better immune functioning. And I think it's a huge conversation that we're missing in forestry and restoration projects of like, where's the fungus? Like, where's the conversations around the fungus and how we could be like dramatically increasing the survival rate of tree plantings if they were just, planted with their mycorrhizal partner. So I'm like really stoked on that and the potentials there. Yeah.
That's like planting an ecosystem, not just planting the tree. You're like planting a biome. That's such a great idea.
Yeah. You can think of it literally as like probiotics, for like an ecology.
For the forest.
For the forest, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. I love that.
Thanks. Yeah.
And it's in your name already, the Symbiotica. That's like already there.
Yeah. Hopefully it's an emerging process. I mean, there's a lot of things that have to be in place, one, to even just like own and manage a nursery. But yeah, I hold deep dreams of that. And thankfully Riot has a lot of plant knowledge. Some that I have, but some that I don't. So we'll do something.
Cool.
Do something cool.
I think there's a nursery for sale in Petaluma right now, actually. A small one, really cute small nursery that has some nice shade.
Interesting.
Mm.
Cool. Like I would imagine you could, like one could also probably get some decent funding and investments for something like this. Like, something that's kind of on the edge, like pretty radical, pretty mysterious. And like now everyone's so stoked about like the fungal realm. If I wrote it out eloquently enough, I bet I could get some investors on my side being like, yeah, super dope. Go for it.
Sounds brilliant. Go for it.
Yeah.
Get it, girl.
So many ideas. Oh my gosh. I don't know.
Do it.
Because you're doing it for like ecosystem resiliency and like the benefit and the immune system. And it seems like the other people, like you mentioned, are doing this, just it's like a secret technology, and they're only releasing it with really expensive, you got to buy in. So it's kind of more of a money thing. It's not really an altruistic endeavor.
Yeah.
So I bet you could get some decent funding for it.
Possible. Yeah.
Hopeful.
Hopeful.
Cool.
Yeah. Oh, there's the bunny again. Look at the little bunny.
It's the cute fun at the end. This is Willow. She
Hi,
was here with
Willow.
us the whole class.
Wow. So patient, Willow. I'm excited for the day that Zoom has like, I don't know, maybe like
Billy buttons.
a little box that you could like put something in and that it'll just like transport to the person. Cause I'd really like to pet your bunny right now. I don't know, maybe that would be a little too intense though for the bunny to like teleport through space-time.
Just maybe a virtual reality bunny.
Virtual reality bunny. Yeah. Yeah. That'll do for now.
Yeah. I just wanted to say hi, Taylor. I'm a good friend of Reishi's, and she talked a lot about you and recommended your teachings. And yeah, it's just so nice to meet you over this digital experience.
Yeah. Likewise. Yeah, you've been popping up in the like realms for quite some time, and I've always been like, who is this? And I'm looking forward to the day where we cross paths in some way. So hi.
Yes.
So nice to meet
you. Hello from the Pacific Northwest. And
hi.
I heard a rumor that you might be joining us on the fungal symposium in Southern Washington.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah, I
Yay.
mean, that's where the intention is. I'm still waiting to hear back from Drew, who was just actually down here visiting us.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah,
I was just with him at Barter Fair.
Nice. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Well,
the mycelial web.
Of course. Yeah. Yeah. Especially in the Pacific Northwest. It's like so just. But yeah, him and me were down here and he was telling us all about it, but I still feel like it's hard to like know for sure if I'm doing it because there's still some like key components that are kind of missing. So I'm like, yes, I'm down, and I don't really know like everything that's going on. So
I kind of just recently joined them, and I'm helping them organize and like,
cool.
You know, sort of encouraging, and you're going to be getting an email soon about it. So, and
awesome.
Yes, put it on your calendars, everybody. It's going to be October 22nd in southern coastal Washington.
Yeah.
The fungal symposium. Yeah. And I also just wanted to offer, I'm a student of East Asian medicine. If you ever have any questions about that perspective about medicinal mushrooms, that's a topic that I really love to share about. So talk about Shin and nourishing the heart and, you know, all these details.
Beautiful. Yeah, I mean, I would love to learn from you more about that realm because I definitely come from more of like a Western academic perspective that has been greatly influenced by ecological animism and like the life force of everything, but I don't really know a lot of specifics about, you know, East Asian medicine or Eastern medicinal practices when it comes to medicinal fungi. So it's such a beautiful offer.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I'm excited to connect more, and thank you so much. And thank you, Ray, for answering all the questions too.
Yay.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for being such an awesome chat moderator.
Tell us, will you tell us a little bit about your moon farm? Like, who do you grow it for medicine, or do you? Yeah, tell us about your farm.
Yeah.
I'll do a little introduction, and Ray can fill in wherever you want. But Moonfruit Mushroom Farm is a small mushroom farm nestled in the forests of Green Valley Road, which is like just right back here, about like 10 minutes away from where I live. And we are an all outdoor farm and growing all of our mushrooms on logs. So cool. Mostly we grow shiitake, for selling fresh shiitake for food and medicine. But we also make a bunch of different like value-added products. So like a shiitake furikake, which is a like medicinal mushroom seasoning, basically. I also make a shiitake turkey tail triple extraction tincture, because a lot of our shiitake logs have kind of been like volunteered by turkey tail. So we also have a bunch of turkey tail growing. And then we just inoculated a bunch of lion's mane, kind of in these like stack type situations. And those just recently started fruiting, but not in like abundance. They're still kind of growing and incubating. And then we have a greenhouse where we have inoculated with reishi and like done this method of burying the logs under the soil. And those are getting started too. But that's the beginning of it. And we're really small. There's just 3 of us, me, Ryeth, and our friend Corey. So we sell out of a small marketplace out of Green Valley Farm and Mill. And then we also sell with a local herb exchange, the Sonoma County Herb Exchange.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's exciting.
Yeah. If you're ever up here, let us know. And we love to take people back there and just like kind of show them what we're doing, because it's pretty unique. Pretty rad. Yeah.
I think the lion's mane would do well in that area. I guess you don't get quite as much rain as like, you know, Oregon, Washington, but yeah.
Still. It's been pretty sparse the past couple of years.
Yeah. Right.
So,
yeah. Here too.
Yeah. Anything else you'd add, Rye?
I don't think so. I mean, I linked the Instagram and website, but Rachel, maybe you want to add something because you visited the farm.
About the farm. Yeah.
Do you want to say something?
Yeah, I hadn't ever been to see a growing facility where there was like replicating the natural ways that mushrooms would grow in their left to their own devices. I've visited a bunch of other farms where they're growing in bags, and it was just really sweet to see a setup that was really trying to mimic and support just more of a wild ways. And they have a pretty, like, I want to use the word sophisticated, but it feels like sophisticated modeled off of like nature, but they do have like spray irrigation going. So the mushrooms are all getting misted, and the logs are partially on the earth and then partially supported. And they taught a workshop Taylor and Riot taught a workshop on log inoculation, and it was at their farm. So a small group of us got to tour the farm and then learned how to drill holes and inoculate the logs and seal them up, and sort of got the lowdown on how to do that at home. But I just love how much experimentation and like trial and error and innovation I saw happening. That felt really inspiring. And I feel like that's the spirit that you guys bring to a lot of your classes. I've also been on like 3 of their mushroom foraging forest experience walks that they've had. And I think I've come to every single thing since I started knowing about you guys.
Yeah, you're definitely our #1 fan, and it's so sweet and so appreciated. We love you so much.
So great. It just I'm sort of newly and invigorated about mushrooms. I'm not a mushroom professional, but I'm definitely a mushroom enthusiast at this point. And I've done some bag cultivation, and my next try is going to be doing some log cultivation inoculation. And yeah, it just feels really enriching, and it feels like a really beautiful kind of metaphor for where we can grow and where we still have areas of learning interdependency and discovery that are important to connect to in our world.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mm. So beautiful. Thank you. Yay.
Yay.
I forgot to stop the recording, so I'm going to do that now.